Imagine two countries standing on the absolute brink of war.
Right, a highly volatile situation.
Exactly. At sea, a heavily armed warship locks its fire control radar on a foreign vessel. It is, well, a split second away from a deadly kinetic strike.
A terrifying scenario, really.
It is, yet at the exact same moment, diplomats from those very same countries are calmly sitting across a mahogany table from one another, sipping tea and negotiating oil contracts.
It is quite the
And
paradox.
it truly is. Good morning to you. Today is Sunday, the 15th of April, 2026.
Good morning.
And you are joining us for a comprehensive intelligence briefing regarding the current geopolitical climate in the Asia-Pacific region.
Specifically focusing on the maritime and territorial developments surrounding the People's Republic of China.
Precisely. Now, this deep dive is sponsored by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application.
And just to provide some context on our data gathering for today's briefing, Stylo News is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Right, the enterprise version.
Yes, that architecture is currently utilized by government, military, and business enterprise operations globally.
It's powerful technology.
It is. So what this means for you, our listener, is that you have unique, direct access to the exact same synthesis tool designed specifically to support global decision makers.
Which is why we can provide this level of detail today. The title of today's briefing is China Power Projection, Artificial Islands, and Escalation Risks.
And the region of focus is, of course, Asia, specifically China.
Right. Our mission today is to, well, extract the primary patterns of events from the past 2 weeks. We want to assess their local, national, and international impacts.
As well as analyze the perspectives of key decision makers.
Exactly. And finally, propose the most likely courses of action regarding these current maritime tensions.
Well, we will begin our assessment with the Taiwan Strait. This sector represents, frankly, the most high-profile flashpoint in the region.
It's the one everyone watches.
Indeed. We must use it as our baseline for observing military behavior before we, expand our analysis to broader regional impacts.
Right. So, reviewing the intelligence estimates from the past 2 weeks, the Taiwan Ministry of National Defense continues to report persistent People's Liberation Army, or PLA, aircraft and naval vessel activity.
Yes, a steady drumbeat of incursions.
Exactly. This includes repeated crossings of the median line into Taiwan's air defense identification zone.
Now, for our listeners, I think it is important to clarify that an ADI is not sovereign airspace.
Right. It's not their actual territorial sky.
No, it is an early warning buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
But repeatedly crossing it, well, it forces Taiwan to constantly scramble its own fighter jets.
Which is incredibly taxing.
Extremely. They are burning through aviation fuel, exhausting their pilots, stressing their airframes, and frankly, bleeding their defense budget dry.
And all of this without a single shot being fired.
Precisely. Furthermore, there are reports of recent PLA drills that specifically simulated a response to a United States nuclear attack.
Within the context of a Taiwan conflict scenario, right?
Yes. It is crucial to evaluate what these indicators actually mean operationally. The intelligence estimates confirm that despite this highly provocative activity, there are no high-confidence indicators of an immediate amphibious invasion.
Okay, let's unpack this for a moment. Because if an invasion were imminent, we would see massive logistical footprints, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. And we are not observing mass amphibious staging.
Right.
There is no large-scale mobilization of civilian roll-off ferries.
The civilian ships they would need.
Yes, and there is no broad logistics surge of blood plasma, ammunition, or fuel on the Fujian coast.
Okay, so looking at the strategic board, this really resembles a chess player aggressively controlling the center of the board, but without actually making a move to capture a single piece.
That is a very apt analogy.
So if the PLA is running these high-level nuclear response drills but not mobilizing the actual ground troops necessary for an invasion, what exactly is the immediate objective of this posturing?
Ooh.
Because it seems like an immense expenditure of resources just to send a message.
Your assessment aligns perfectly with the strategic doctrine of gray zone pressure and political warfare.
Gray zone pressure.
Yes, the objective is not an immediate kinetic war. Gray zone warfare operates specifically in that murky area below the threshold that would, well, trigger a conventional military response from the United States or its allies.
So it's the proverbial boiling of the frog.
Precisely. The goal is to systematically erode Taiwanese public and military confidence. By normalizing a highly coercive military presence, Beijing seeks to make their dominance seem, frankly, inevitable.
And there is a political dimension to this as well, correct?
There is.
Because the Kuomintang opposition leader, Cheng Le-wen, recently visited Beijing for engagement.
Yes, a highly publicized trip.
And this visit has been framed by some regional analysts as a peace mission?
Correct. By combining relentless military pressure with targeted political outreach, such as hosting that Kuomintang visit, Beijing attempts to widen internal democratic divisions within Taiwan.
Yep.
They are carefully shaping a narrative that accommodation and negotiation are, well, preferable to resistance.
Thus achieving their strategic aims without ever crossing the threshold into open armed conflict.
Exactly.
So, if Taiwan is where Beijing uses this gray zone strategy to paralyze minds, the South China Sea is where they use it to paralyze physical maps.
A very literal translation of the strategy.
Right. Let's look at how this same psychological tactic translates into concrete and asphalt down south.
It is quite a tangible shift.
It is. Intelligence indicates that China has resumed construction at Antelope Reef in the Paracel Islands.
Which is highly significant.
Yes, because it follows a nearly decade-long pause in activity at that specific site.
Right.
Satellite imagery confirms new runways, and missile facilities are actively being developed on what used to be basically a mere speck of coral.
Concurrently, we are observing aggressive administrative countermoves from the other side.
From the Philippines.
Yes. The Philippines recently issued an executive order unilaterally standardizing Filipino names for over 130 maritime features in the Calayan Island group.
And I imagine Beijing did not take that well.
They did not. This administrative action has been met with immediate diplomatic protests from Beijing, which labels the renaming as illegal and a direct infringement on its sovereignty.
And this administrative friction is accompanied by actual physical escalation.
Real-world consequences.
Exactly. On March 7th, the Chinese PLA Navy corvette, hull number 622, locked its fire control radar on the Philippine guided missile frigate BRP Miguel Malvar near Sabina Shoal.
An incredibly dangerous maneuver.
It is. Additionally, there are confirmed reports of flare firing near a Philippine Coast Guard aircraft operating over Mischief Reef.
Yes.
Now here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit surreal. We are watching two entirely different types of conflict happening simultaneously.
On one hand, you have the highly aggressive physical act of a radar lock.
Right, which is a hair's breadth away from a kinetic missile strike. But on the other hand, you have the bureaucratic administrative warfare of renaming reefs and shoals on a map.
It does feel absurd to discuss paperwork and missile locks in the same breath.
It really does. How do we reconcile that?
Well, to understand the escalation neutrally, we must impartially break down the opposing legal and historical viewpoints driving both the physical and the administrative actions.
Okay.
From the perspective of the Chinese government, Beijing asserts indisputable historical sovereignty over these areas, referring to them collectively as the Nunchakuandao.
Right. Their claim is historically demarcated by the 9-dash line.
Exactly. Consequently, China views any Philippine military patrols or administrative renaming as illegal provocations.
I see.
To Beijing, these are violations of its territorial integrity, which, in their view, fully justifies its robust maritime enforcement and radar locking.
But the Philippines is operating under a completely different legal framework.
Correct. Conversely, the Philippines grounds its actions strictly in international law.
Specifically citing the 2016 International Arbitration ruling from The Hague.
Yes. That ruling legally invalidated China's expansive 9-dash line claims under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Therefore, Manila views its patrols, the renaming of features, and the establishment of a new Coast Guard command center on Pag-asa Island as lawful assertions of its sovereign rights.
Sovereign rights within its own exclusive economic zone.
And an exclusive economic zone, just to be clear, grants a state the right to exploit marine resources, like fish and oil, within 200 nautical miles of its coast.
Precisely. So we are observing a layered control strategy. Both sides are utilizing every available instrument of statecraft.
From radar locks to renaming ceremonies.
Exactly, all to legitimize their presence.
But these local maritime decisions, they aren't happening in a vacuum. The catalysts driving this friction are increasingly global.
They absolutely are.
Specifically, events in the Middle East are forcing immediate strategic pivots in Asia.
Yes. The intelligence outlines a clear, undeniable chain of geopolitical cause and effect. The ongoing conflict involving Iran has necessitated the redeployment of United States naval assets.
Right. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group was moved from the Western Pacific to the Middle East.
And this reallocation has created a perceived deterrence gap in the Indo-Pacific, Regional actors are acutely aware when a massive symbol of American military might leaves the theater,
Furthermore, this Middle East conflict has disrupted global oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz, causing fuel prices to soar globally.
which has a devastating local impact.
It does. And if you are wondering why a fuel strike in Manila matters to global security, well, the local impact of that disruption is severe. The Philippines has officially declared a national energy emergency.
We are seeing major socioeconomic distress there.
Widespread, paralyzing strikes by jeepney drivers, severe inflationary strain on the broader economy.
And this has created a profound diplomatic paradox.
It really has. Because the sheer necessity of securing energy has forced the Philippines to pragmatically resume bilateral talks with China in Guangzhou.
Specifically regarding joint oil and gas exploration.
Right. At the exact same time, military alliances are hardening at a historic rate to counter Chinese expansion.
Yes, Japan has deployed approximately 420 ground self-defense force personnel to the Philippines to participate in the shoulder-to-shoulder joint military exercises.
And it is critical to note that this is Japan's first troop deployment to the Philippines since the end of the Second World War.
A monumental shift in regional defense posture.
Absolutely. Additionally, India is expanding its strategic influence by selling BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles to Southeast Asian nations.
Including the Philippines.
Wait, I need to stop you there.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
the paradox I mentioned in the introduction.
Right.
You're telling me the Philippines is buying supersonic cruise missiles from India to defend themselves from China. They're hosting historic troop deployments from Japan and opening new military command centers on disputed islands.
Yes.
Yet, simultaneously, Philippine diplomats are sitting across a negotiating table from Chinese officials in Guangzhou attempting to broker joint oil deals.
That is the situation, yes.
How is Beijing not laughing them out of the negotiation room? I mean, how does that dual strategy actually hold up in practice?
It is a calculated, albeit precarious, dual strategy of deterrence and economic survival. The Philippine administration is actively hedging its bets.
Hedging their bets.
Yes, they are methodically building a multilateral defense network with the United States, Japan, and India to deter territorial encroachment at sea.
But long-term deterrence does not fuel public transportation today.
Precisely. A supersonic cruise missile cannot stabilize a plunging currency or end a national transit strike.
Right.
Therefore, Manila must pragmatically engage with Beijing to address a severe domestic energy crisis that threatens immediate internal stability.
The reality of statecraft is often contradictory.
Highly contradictory.
So this complex balancing act on the surface is mirrored by an equally complex environment beneath the waves.
The subsurface domain.
Yes. The visible alliances, the Coast Guard standoffs, the economic pressures, they are only the surface layer of this regional competition.
The intelligence reporting highlights extensive Chinese ocean floor mapping operations across the Pacific, Indian, and Arctic Oceans.
With vessels such as the Dongfang Hong 3 conducting these detailed seabed surveys.
Exactly. Officially, these are designated as civilian scientific research under Beijing's policy of civil-military fusion.
And that's a strategy where civilian technologies and infrastructure are legally required to support military objectives, correct?
Correct. And defense analysts assess this data is absolutely vital for enhancing submarine warfare capabilities.
Explain exactly how that works. Why is mapping the ocean floor so critical to military strategy?
Because submarines do not use windows. They navigate and hunt using sound. This involves incredibly complex acoustic modeling.
I see.
Sound travels differently depending on water temperature, salinity, and pressure. By mapping the underwater canyons, the thermal layers, and the topographical features of the Pacific, the Chinese Navy knows exactly where their submarines can hide from Allied sonar.
Wow. They are essentially turning the ocean floor into a mapped tactical stealth zone.
Yes. It transforms a civilian scientific endeavor into highly aggressive battle space preparation.
And that brings us to another critical vulnerability beneath the waves.
Submarine communication cables.
Yes. Following precise sabotage incidents in the past few years, Taiwan and NATO have drastically increased maritime patrols and legal penalties to protect this infrastructure.
It is vital infrastructure.
Think about the internet connection you are using to listen to us right now. I mean, 99% of all transoceanic data, financial transactions, military intelligence, civilian internet, it all travels through these cables.
It is comparable to the invisible foundation of a fortress.
Right. You can build all the formidable walls you want on the surface, the alliances, the frigates, the Coast Guard stations. But if the foundation is compromised, If those underwater data cables are severed, your surface defenses are rendered entirely useless.
You are deaf and blind.
Exactly.
That analogy is highly accurate. Severing those cables is blinding the fortress. It encapsulates the emerging concept of a digital-first island chain.
A digital-first island chain.
Yes. The traditional geographic defense perimeter, stretching from Japan through Taiwan down to the Philippines, is being augmented by a technological one.
Taiwan, the United States, and Japan are utilizing artificial intelligence and unmanned systems to create a resilient, networked defense posture that can hopefully survive if those cables are cut.
However, this digital domain is highly contested. The Philippine military recently conducted a cross-agency counterintelligence operation that uncovered a Chinese espionage network.
And the most concerning aspect of that operation was the methodology.
Exactly. Notably, this network successfully recruited local insiders within the Philippine government to leak sensitive patrol information.
Wow.
This marks a strategic shift from embedding foreign operatives to leveraging local assets, making detection much more difficult.
Meanwhile, China is cautiously but steadily integrating AI into its own operational doctrine.
Particularly focusing on autonomous drone swarms and advanced missile targeting technologies.
All designed to overwhelm that very same digital-first island chain.
Exactly.
Which brings us to synthesizing the intelligence gathered so far to project the most likely future scenarios for you, the listener.
Based on the curated intelligence, the perspectives of the primary actors are distinctly entrenched.
The United States is prioritizing the strengthening of multilateral alliances and military logistics.
While carefully managing the strain of global overstretch from Europe to the Middle East.
Right. And China is methodically advancing its military and dual-use capabilities.
Asserting its territorial claims and heavily advocating for regional rather than Western dispute resolution mechanisms.
Meanwhile, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, alongside the United Nations, is heavily advocating for the finalization of a binding code of conduct.
To manage disputes and prevent an accidental kinetic conflict?
We also have access to the social media sentiment analysis via the Stylo News AI engine.
A very useful tool.
It really is. It provides a fascinating look into the public psychology driving these nations. On Chinese platforms, there is a strong nationalistic support for the defense of sovereignty.
But the data reveals a distinct and measurable wariness among the public regarding the prospect of actual kinetic war.
In the Philippines and across the broader ASEAN region, the sentiment is deeply fractured. There are intense nationalist calls to defend sovereign territory against encroachment.
However, these are directly countered by profound, widespread anxiety over the prospect of becoming a proxy battleground for great power competition.
And the economic ruin that would inevitably follow a war.
Yes. Integrating these perspectives, the intelligence estimates provide a clear forecast. Which is a near-term, full-scale amphibious invasion of Taiwan remains highly unlikely due to the absence of necessary operational indicators and the internal economic challenges currently facing Beijing.
So the most likely course of action across the region is a sustained continuation of localized gray zone coercion.
We will see more administrative warfare, further militarization of existing outposts like Antelope Reef, aggressive cyber probing, and complex multilateral military exercises.
All designed to test boundaries without triggering a conventional war.
Precisely.
So, based on the pattern of life analysis we have access to today, what are the most likely specific events our listeners should watch for in the coming weeks to verify this intelligence forecast?
I advise monitoring 3 specific timelines. First, observe the continuation and scale of the shoulder-to-shoulder exercises in the Philippines.
Okay.
Specifically, note any further integration of Japanese or other allied forces, which would signal a hardening of that deterrence network.
And the second?
Second, track the progress of the Philippines-China energy negotiations in Guangzhou. Any breakdown in these economic talks could correlate with an immediate retaliatory spike in maritime friction at sea.
That makes sense.
Third, monitor open-source satellite imagery of Antelope Reef for incremental infrastructure additions, particularly the deployment of advanced sensor arrays or anti-aircraft missile defense systems.
Okay, stepping out of the anchor booth for a minute, that is a massive amount of intelligence to process.
It really is.
But it paints a vivid, albeit tense, picture of how connected everything is. I mean, from the price of gas required to run a jeepney in Manila to the temperature of the water hiding a submarine in the Pacific, it's all part of the exact same global current.
It absolutely is. The butterfly effect is very real in geopolitics.
Right.
And navigating that current requires tools that can process that immense scale of information in real time.
Stripping away the noise to find the actual signals.
Yeah,
And that is exactly what Stylo News provides. For those of you listening, Stylo News isn't just a sponsor, it's a remarkably powerful mobile and computer application that you can download right now.
it allows you to customize your own personal intelligence style briefs.
Yes, it pulls from hundreds of traditional news sources and X utilizing the exact same AI analysis we discussed today. You can track these maritime developments yourself.
It truly is an invaluable tool for cutting through the daily information overload.
It is. If you want AI-powered news on demand without the sensationalism, I highly recommend you subscribe to Stylo News at www.stylenews.com.
It helps identify the actual patterns that matter to your life and business.
We want to thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We love putting these together for you, and we really want to hear from you.
Yes, please reach out and request topics for future deep dives.
And be sure to follow Stylo News on all your favorite social media platforms.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to consider regarding the digital foundation we discussed earlier. With nations in the Indo-Pacific increasingly relying on artificial intelligence, autonomous drone swarms, and unmanned systems to patrol these highly contested gray zones, what happens when an autonomous algorithm, rather than a human captain, makes a miscalculation during a tense maritime standoff?
Wow, that is a chilling thought to leave on. But we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for listening.